I was standing at the kitchen counter, pouring my second cup of coffee, when my phone lit up. It was my lawyer, Mitchell. Not a call, a text. And Mitchell never texted. Do not go to that meeting. Call me right now. I mean it. I set the mug down too hard. Coffee sloshed over the rim onto the white tile, and I just stood there staring at it, reading his message again. I had 40 minutes before I was supposed to be at my brother's house for what he'd called a family financial planning session. I had my portfolio printed, my notes organized. I'd even ironed my blazer the night before because I wanted to look like someone who had her life together, someone who deserved a seat at the table when it came to our parents' estate. I called Mitchell. He picked up on the first ring. "Don't go," he said, before I even spoke. "Where are you right now?" "My apartment." I was about to leave. "Mitchell, what is?" "Good. Stay there. I need you to come to my office instead, this afternoon if you can." He wouldn't tell me more on the phone, just said he'd found something, and that whatever I did, I should not sign anything, talk to anyone in the family, or respond to any messages until we'd spoken in person. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it that I recognized from the one time I'd watched him in court. Controlled urgency. The voice of someone holding a door shut. I sat on my couch in my ironed blazer, and I waited. My parents had owned a lumber distribution company in Oregon for 31 years. My father built it from a single truck and a handshake deal with a mill outside Eugene. By the time I was in high school, it had 12 employees, a small warehouse, and a reputation in the region that my dad wore quietly, like a well-broken-in jacket. My mother handled the books. She was the one who knew where every dollar went and why. They retired 5 years ago and handed day-to-day operations to my older brother, Rowan. Rowan had always been the one people assumed would run things. He was older, he was loud in the right rooms, he shook hands firmly and told good stories at dinner. My parents trusted him. I don't think they ever questioned it, not really. He was their son. And I was their daughter who moved to Portland and worked in nonprofit fundraising and called every Sunday. When my mother was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's 3 years ago, everything shifted. My father was already managing his own health issues, a bad hip, high blood pressure, and Rowan stepped into the role of family decision-maker almost by gravity. Nobody appointed him, he just filled the space. I flew home more. I started asking questions. And that was when, slowly, things stopped adding up. The drive to Mitchell's office took 25 minutes. I spent most of it replaying the last 6 months in my head, the moments I'd pushed aside because I didn't want to believe what they might mean. The time I'd asked to see the quarterly statements and Rowan said the accountant was restructuring the reporting format. The time my father mentioned a document he'd signed and didn't quite remember what it was. The afternoon my sister-in-law, Rowan's wife Ingrid, had called me, not him, her, to say that my parents had decided to put the company in a trust and that maybe I should let the professionals handle the complexity. The way she'd said complexity like it was something that would frighten me. I'd written it off. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself Rowan was stressed, Ingrid was protective of her husband, and my mother's illness was making everyone anxious and raw. I walked into Mitchell's office at 2:17 in the afternoon. He had a folder on his desk. He didn't offer me coffee. 6 weeks ago, he said, your brother filed paperwork to transfer controlling interest of your parents' company into a family LLC. On paper, the LLC has 4 members, your parents, your brother, and Ingrid. I waited. That's not necessarily, you're not in it. The room went quiet in the way rooms do when something lands wrong. There's more, Mitchell said. The LLC operating agreement, which your father signed, includes a clause that gives Rowan sole managerial authority over all financial decisions. Your parents retain nominal membership shares, but they have no voting rights, neither would you, because again, you're not named anywhere in this document. My father signed this 3 months ago. On a Tuesday afternoon at a notary in Medford, your mother was listed as a witness. He paused. Your mother has moderate stage Alzheimer's. I heard myself say something. I don't remember what. I think it was just a sound. There's also this. He slid a page across the desk. It was a letter on my parents' home address letterhead, with my father's signature at the bottom, stating that I had agreed to relinquish any future claim to the business assets in exchange for a one-time payment. The letter was dated 8 weeks ago. The amount listed was $12,000. I had never received $12,000 from my family. I had never signed anything. I had never agreed to anything. That's my father's signature, I said slowly. It appears to be yes, but I know. Mitchell folded his hands on the desk. That's why I'm showing you. I drove home and I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time. Rowan and I had never been close the way some siblings are, the kind who call each other just to talk, who vacation together, who know each other's friends by name. But I hadn't thought we were this. I hadn't thought we were the kind of family where one person would quietly dismantle another's inheritance while their mother couldn't remember what day it was. I thought about Thanksgiving 2 years ago, when Rowan had given a long toast about legacy and family and honoring what Dad built. I'd thought it was beautiful. I'd teared up. I went upstairs and I called my father. He answered on the third ring, and his voice was tired in the way it always was lately. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing important, a storm that had come through, whether the Timbers would have a good season, a documentary he'd been watching. And then, carefully, I asked him about the LLC. He didn't say much. He said he thought it was a tax thing. He said Rowan had explained it and it made sense. He said Ingrid had been very helpful in organizing the paperwork. Did you know I wasn't included? I asked. A long pause. Rowan said you'd agreed to a buyout, my father said. He said you wanted the cash instead. He said you were happy with it. I had to breathe through my nose for a moment. Dad, I said, I never agreed to that. I never received any money. I never even had that conversation. Another pause, longer this time. I'll talk to him, my father said quietly. Please don't, I said. Not yet. Please let me handle this. Mitchell had told me to document everything, so I did. I went through every email I had from Rowan and Ingrid for the past 2 years. I printed bank records. I pulled every text thread. And somewhere in a 6-month-old email from Ingrid, the one about the trust complexity, I found something Mitchell had flagged, a CC to a financial advisor I'd never heard of, at a firm in Sacramento, listed as a business transition specialist. Mitchell ran the name. The firm had been involved in 3 previous LLC restructuring cases in Oregon and California. In 2 of them, there had been elder financial abuse complaints filed with the state. We filed for emergency injunctive relief the following Monday. The LLC transfer was frozen pending an investigation. My father was connected with an independent elder law attorney, someone with no connection to anyone in the family, and within 2 weeks he had a clearer picture of what he'd actually signed. He was devastated, not in a dramatic way. My father doesn't do dramatic. He went quiet in the way he went quiet when my mother's diagnosis came through. The silence of a man absorbing something that has permanently changed the shape of his world. He called me that night and said, I should have asked more questions. You trusted your son, I said. I trusted him too much, he said. The family financial planning meeting that I'd been called to, the one Mitchell had stopped me from attending, turned out to be the moment Rowan had planned for me to sign the remaining paperwork that would have finalized everything. There was a packet waiting. My name was at the top. The signature lines were highlighted in yellow. Mitchell told me later that if I'd walked through that door with my ironed blazer and my printed portfolio, I would have sat down at my brother's dining room table and been handed documents I didn't fully understand, with people I trusted explaining in calm voices that this was just a formality. Just standard procedure, just the next step. I know myself well enough to know I might have signed. Rowan called me 11 days after the injunction was filed. It was a Sunday evening. I don't know what you think is happening, he said, but you're tearing this family apart. I let him talk. He talked for a long time. He talked about how much work he put into the company, how I'd been absent for years, how I didn't understand the financial realities of running a business, how this was about protecting our parents. He said Ingrid had only been trying to help, He said I was making my mother's condition worse by stirring things up. He said Dad was confused and fragile, and I was taking advantage of that. He said a lot of things. I let him finish. "Rowan," I said, "there's a letter with my name on it saying I agreed to give up my inheritance for $12,000. I never signed anything. I never got any money. What do you want me to do with that?" Silence. "We can talk about the letter," he said finally. "My lawyer is handling it," I said. "Have Ingrid call him." I hung up. I sat with my knees pulled up on the couch and I cried for a while, not because I was sad exactly, but because of the particular exhaustion of realizing something about a person you've known your whole life. The grief of it is different from other grief. There's no clean edge to it. The investigation took 4 months. What came out of it was worse than I'd expected, and also, in some way, not surprising anymore. Rowan and Ingrid had been quietly redirecting company revenue into a separate account, one listed under the LLC, for approximately 18 months. My parents had been receiving their normal retirement distributions, but those distributions were being funded by a line of credit taken out against the company's assets. The actual operating profits had been moving elsewhere. The independent auditor described it as systematic financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. That phrase sat in the official report like a stone. My father had to be told carefully, in stages. His elder law attorney was present both times. Rowan was charged. Ingrid was named as a correspondent in the civil case. The company, my father's company, the one built on a single truck and 31 years of handshake deals, was placed in receivership while the accounts were untangled. It took another 8 months before operations stabilized under an independent manager. My father was eventually restored as beneficial owner, with proper legal safeguards in place. I want to tell you something about the day the receivership ended and the company was formally returned to my father's estate plan, updated, this time by attorneys who had no connection to Rowan. My father called me from the parking lot of the attorney's office. He was 71 years old, and he'd just sat through 3 hours of legal documentation. "It's done," he said. "I know," I said. "How are you feeling?" He was quiet for a moment. "Like myself again," he said. "Like I can look at something and know what it is. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the money, not the legal outcome, not any of the drama that had accumulated over 2 years of fighting. It was that one sentence, like I can look at something and know what it is." My mother never fully understood what had happened. Her Alzheimer's had progressed enough that the legal proceedings existed outside her awareness. Some days she knew who I was, and some days she called me by her sister's name. I sat with her twice a week, and we watched old episodes of a cooking show she'd loved in the 90s, and sometimes she laughed at the same jokes she'd laughed at before. And that was enough. She never had to carry what Rowan had done. I'm grateful for that, at least. People ask me sometimes what I would have done differently. Whether there were signs I missed earlier, red flags I dismissed, moments where I could have intervened before things got as far as they did. Honestly, yes, there were moments. The first time Ingrid said let the professionals handle the complexity, I should have asked which professionals, and who hired them, and who they reported to. I should have asked my father directly and immediately, not months later when I was frightened and already suspicious. I should have trusted the small, tight feeling in my chest that showed up every time Rowan deflected a question with a long answer that never quite addressed what I'd asked. But I also know why I didn't. Because it's hard to believe that someone who gave a beautiful Thanksgiving toast about legacy and family is simultaneously moving money out of your parents' accounts. Because trusting people you've known your whole life is not a flaw. It's what families are supposed to do. The flaw was his, not mine. That took me a long time to really believe. Rowan and I have not spoken since the Sunday phone call. I don't know if we ever will. His sentencing was handled as part of a plea agreement. Restitution, probation, conditions I don't need to list here. Ingrid cooperated with investigators in exchange for reduced civil liability. The financial advisor in Sacramento was separately reported to the state licensing board. My father's company still runs. Different manager, leaner operation. but the name on the building is the same as it's always been. Sometimes when I drive through that part of Oregon, I think about the version of the story where I ironed my blazer, drove to my brother's house, and sat down at his dining room table. Mitchell's text stopped that story from happening. I don't know if I'll ever fully process what it means that my brother looked at our aging parents and saw an opportunity. I don't know if that's something you process exactly or just something you learn to carry differently over time. What I do know is that I answered the phone. I went to the office, I asked the questions, and I did not sign anything. If you have a parent who is aging and a sibling who has stepped in to handle the complexity, and a small, tight feeling in your chest every time you ask a question and get a long answer that doesn't quite answer it, please listen to that feeling. Get an independent attorney, not a family friend, not someone your sibling recommended, someone with no connection to anyone involved. And if your lawyer texts you on a Sunday morning and says, "Do not go, don't go," I've thought a lot about what actually made the difference in all of this. Not the legal strategy, not the injunction, not the auditors or the paperwork or any of the machinery that eventually untangled what Rowan had built. What made the difference was a single decision made in under 30 seconds to call Mitchell back instead of getting in my car. That's it. That's the whole thing. And I keep thinking about how close I came to not doing it. I'd ironed my blazer, I had my portfolio. I was ready to sit at my brother's table and believe, because I wanted to believe, that we were still a family doing something together rather than something being done to me. The pull of that, the wanting things to be normal, is stronger than people give it credit for. It's not naivety. It's hope. And there's nothing wrong with hoping your family is good. But hope without eyes open is how you end up with highlighted signature lines and a smiling sister-in-law and a pen already uncapped in your hand. What I learned, what I'm still learning, is that integrity isn't just about what you do when you know something is wrong. It's about what you do when you're not sure, when the feeling is small and inconvenient and you'd rather dismiss it than follow it somewhere uncomfortable. Rowan counted on me dismissing it. He had factored my discomfort into his plan. Every deflected question, every "let the professionals handle it," every long, smooth answer that somehow said nothing, those weren't accidents. They were designed for someone who would rather keep the peace than keep asking. I was that person for too long. And I don't say that to punish myself, because I genuinely believe the fault was his and not mine. But I also think it matters to be honest about it, because the version of the story where I'm just a passive victim who got rescued by a well-timed text is not quite right. Mitchell's text mattered, but so did the moment I chose to sit on my couch instead of talking myself out of his warning. So did every question I asked afterward. So did the decision to protect my father's clarity over my own comfort. That's the part nobody tells you about standing up for yourself inside a family. It costs something. Not just in the obvious ways, the legal fees and the lost relationship and the long silence where a sibling used to be. It costs you the easier version of your own story, the one where everyone basically meant well and it all worked out fine. Once you pull on the thread, you don't get to unknow what unravels. My mother never knew. I'm grateful she was spared that. My father said something to me once after everything had settled that I've carried with me since. He said that the hardest part wasn't finding out what Rowan had done. It was realizing he'd done it slowly, over time, in ways that were designed to look like nothing. He used my trust as a tool, my father said, and I handed it to him. That sentence has changed how I move through the world. I trust people. I still do. But I also ask questions now, even when the room gets uncomfortable. I ask a second time if the first answer doesn't land right. I don't apologize for asking. I don't dress it up or soften it or wait for a better moment. The companies and estates and inheritances, those things can be rebuilt or restructured or legally restored. What can't be given back is the time someone spent trusting someone who was already counting the money. The best protection against that isn't suspicion. It's the willingness to know the truth even when you'd rather not. That's what I keep coming back to, not the outcome, the decision to look.